Welcome, everyone, to our live stream event special this evening, 1 year of Donald Trump. I'm the host of this event, Joe Carducci. You may know me as JoJo from Jers on social media. I cannot believe that we are here still. Somehow it is surreal, and I am still somehow in denial and disbelief about it, but we are. And it has been 100 years in the making, and January has been 100 weeks long. So a bunch of incredible people, friends in this space, are going to be joining us tonight to sort of reflect on this year. We're going to break it up into segments because that seems the most manageable thing to do, because God knows plenty happened in every month and every week and every day. But we're going to reflect on those months of time, and we're going to reflect on where we are right now. And we would love to see you guys in the comments. Would love to take a look at your questions in there and as well. But with that, I am going to introduce our first guest tonight, Vanessa Branda. She's an incredible human being. She's co-host of the Polytoxic podcast on the Siren Network, which is our network that we created with Sam Schwartz, myself, and these incredible contributors. So hi, Vanessa. How are you?
Hi, I'm doing all right. How are you doing today?
Every day is a new shit show, and honestly, like, sometimes I just can't believe it's real. And today I was just thinking, like, can someone just send the writers home, please? Like, I think we've had enough of this this season of this shit show.
That's what it really feels like. It really kind of feels like we're sort of living in this Truman Show, this really messed up reality television show. Every day seems to be getting crazier than the next. And I think it's a lot for anybody to handle. I mean, even for people like us that are breathing and sleeping this stuff 24/7. I think a lot of people are at their limit these days.
Yeah, and one thing that I think, for me anyway, that I have found cathartic and helpful is community. And when I feel gaslit and I feel alone, then I feel disheartened, and I really feel disillusioned, and I get depressed. So when we name the things, even though it's hard, and it's really frustrating and difficult to contend with all the time, when we know that we're not alone navigating it, we know we're not crazy, that for me is extremely helpful, which is one of the reasons why I think tonight is important, because we have to name what we've been through, what we're going through. It's trauma. I mean, really.
On a massive scale. I mean, I don't think any human is mentally equipped to deal with this stuff. And I definitely think that is by design. I think the shock and awe, they let us know we were going to be getting shock and awe in the very beginning. And they've held that promise because it's been that over and over and over again every day.
Yeah, one of the things that I think sometimes, I wrote this last year, was it's shock and Orwellian, right? Like, that's like, it's a play on the shock and awe, because like, when it's not hyperbolic to say that this feels like, it feels Orwellian, especially when they're telling us to disbelieve our own eyes and ears. But let's travel back in time to a year ago. I wish I had some, like Wayne's World music or something, even though this is not a happy event. It's kind of like a funeral, but well, anyway, I'm not gonna get myself into too much trouble there. But let's go back, because a year ago today we did a live event, and Harry Dunn joined us that night. Immediately in the wake of Donald Trump pardoning 1,600 January 6th. I don't know what you want to call them. You want to call them a rabid horde? You want to call them a mob? You want to call them terrorists? You want to call them insurrectionists? You certainly are not going to call them patriots. But let's go back to that moment, because we had Harry's reaction in real time. And to say that he was upset is an understatement, and rightfully so. So let's start with that.
I think a lot of us had a feeling that something like that was going to happen. But a year later, where we're at now, we definitely know that multiple members of those January 6th insurrectionists, like Enrique Tarrio, are now working with ICE. So that is quite a big difference in where we started a year ago. But I think our worst fears were confirmed when that happened. But now it's even worse, because they've been given badges and guns, and they're in our communities now. But I think this is what happens when nobody is held accountable. from the top all the way to the bottom. When January 6th happened, we saw a bunch of, the insurrectionists get arrested and go through trials and things like that. But they never went, nobody at the top was taken responsible. And now all of those people, I believe, are the foot soldiers, stormtroopers that we're seeing in the streets today. That's my opinion on it.
And the hypocrisy of the fact that they keep saying in the case of Renee Good and others elsewhere that if you impede law enforcement, if you put your hands on law enforcement, which by the way, Renee Good didn't do, but if you impede them in any way, then you should expect the full weight of the law, that they can do what they want with impunity. When you hold those two completely contradictory truths at one time, that she was murdered for simply having her car in the road and for her wife, speaking her truth, she was murdered, and yet the only person who died at the hands of the police on January 6th was Ashley Babbitt, who was armed and attempting to violently get into the speaker's lobby, which the lawmakers were on the other side. And they will say to you that they were peaceful patriots who were exercising their First Amendment right, that they all deserve pardons, but she was a domestic terrorist.
Yep. And the big difference here is these people went to the Capitol. They erected a noose and they were screaming to hang Mike Pence. They wanted to stop the transfer of power and the election. So this was an actual insurrection. The difference of the people that are in Minnesota right now, first of all, they're not paid protesters. There is citizens coming out from everywhere. Nobody's paying them to be there. They're protesting the murder of a woman by the federal government. And so the flippant rhetoric is just where this continues to get more dangerous, because we saw people really trying to overthrow the government, and now they're being rewarded. And he's saying that citizens are insurrectionists. And I think that just sets a really dangerous precedent for everybody in the country.
Right. It says if you commit acts of violence against law enforcement in my name, that's okay. But if you peacefully protest against me, then you're a domestic terrorist and we can do whatever we want to you. I mean, that is it's terrifying. It's absolutely terrifying. What they want it to be a chilling effect, that they want to scare people so that we don't record what they're doing, so that we don't, stand up and speak out, so that we don't peacefully assemble. They very much want us to be afraid to do that. That was it's a huge story. It's still huge. It is Orwellian because they are trying to rewrite the events of January 6th to this day, but that's not the only thing that happened a year ago. We had Elon Musk with DOGE, and as of January 2026, roughly 317,000 federal employees lost their jobs or left the government in 2025 alone. And Donald Trump was talking about that today. And he was saying, they all went to the private sector. And now they're so rich and they're making so much money that they're buying up all the houses, which is bullshit. But we know now that DOGE not only didn't save any money, that they actually ended up costing money. And we also know that several people who were working for DOGE were stealing Social Security information. Like, oh my God. But remember how crazy that was at the time, and then looking back on it now?
Yes, and we still to this day don't know what the hell they were doing in there. We don't know what they actually even did. And also, where is all of the money of the salaries of all of those people for the government jobs that they cut? There's a lot of missing information that I think we should have access to. And I think it's really convenient that after all of his Nazi saluting and fucking around in the government, Elon Musk has just skirted away, and now he's just doing whatever he's doing in Texas, and just no accountability. Like, that seems to be the theme. There's just no accountability for anything, and it's freaking insane.
No, and it's that technocracy, or whatever they call it, technocratic broscape. Like, he's also, like I said, bankrolling racists in Texas. But this is what kills me is that it wasn't so long ago when he said Donald Trump is in the Epstein files, and then within months he's at Mar-a-Lago, he's at the White House, at another one of those state dinners. And he wasn't wrong. Because the Epstein files are still out there, and we know that Donald Trump's name is in them. But I guess for Elon Musk, that's not a red line.
It's not a red line for any of them. I mean, we see it day after day on television. They just child pedophilia was not the line for them. Trying to overthrow the government isn't the line from them. And this is not something that I believe that can be reformed in any way. There's nothing that I think can change what's going on there. And it's just, I hate it when I'm hearing people say we need, to reform this, and, we need to reach across the aisle. And I don't believe that we can do that. I don't think it can be reformed personally.
Well, it certainly seems like Republicans have completely abdicated and self-gelded to the point where they are no longer a co-equal branch of government. They are just an arm of Donald Trump. Just like, don't call him Speaker Mike Johnson, call him Secretary Mike Johnson, because they're basically cabinet members.
Basically.
Right. And one of the other things that they did, that was that crazy "give me 5 things you did every week" email, like hello big brother. Do you remember that shit? Like, we forget so much of this, but when you lay it out there, it's like, holy crap.
Yeah, and they were in there for what, at least 3 months, 90 days, tinkering around, and I would like to know what they were working on. None of us know. But coming from a guy who went into Tesla and literally, I'm sorry, not Tesla, Twitter, broke the entire thing, I think it's really interesting that he wants to know what our government employees are working on. It's
Right.
I keep saying it. It's just insane. There's
and I'm old enough to remember once upon a time when people were like, "Oh, but my personal freedoms, you're overstepping by asking me to get a vaccine and wear a mask." But it's like, here's all my private information and my social security number and my blood type and my address and my voting record.
I just did a video about this the other day. The people that would not put masks on in a global pandemic are now in the streets with guns, tear gassing babies, shooting suburban housewives. It's like this. It seems crazy to me that it's only been a year, because it feels like so much has happened in just this 1 year. But it also at the same time feels like we've been going through this for 20. It just feels like it hasn't ever stopped since 2016, even before that. But it's been a really long decade of a year.
It really has. In 2026 has already been a long decade of a year. And the thing we were talking about trauma with the last couple minutes we have here, something else that began at the beginning of this second season of this shit show was them gutting USAID. And what that has done in a year is led to anywhere in the neighborhood of 600,000 to 725,000 or more deaths worldwide. They're estimating that by 2030, 14 million people will have died around the world as a consequence of us pulling out of all of that international and global aid. We used to be the country that would come in and help. They had pallets of food. They had contraceptives, which actually, believe it or not, for a lot of these third world countries are life-saving. And instead of giving them out, they burned and destroyed them and then ceased giving the aid altogether. That is inflicting trauma on the globe.
Yeah. While simultaneously sending billions of dollars to Venezuela and other countries where we don't know what they're doing with this money. He's just taking all of the good, I think, of what America used to be and helping our neighbors and having these relationships with other countries and, seemingly being this good guy. He's just erased all of that, and all of that positive stuff, and the money is going all of these places where it shouldn't be.
Before we go to
American right now, I truly feel that way.
Right, exactly. And before we go to our next guest, Adam Mockler, do you have any just kind of closing reflective thoughts? A couple quick lines of something that you might, I don't want to say hopeful, but like just something to sort of your look ahead.
I was feeling a little bit hopeless, as we're watching the horrifying things that ICE are doing. But today, when I watched his press conference, it made me feel better, because I feel like it's showing cracks in the foundation. I think the public is now aware after things that have been happening over the last couple of weeks. And I got a little bit of a burst of enthusiasm and energy around this, because he is not well. I mean, very obviously he's not well mentally, but I think we watched a really steep decline in that press conference today. And I think invoking the 25th Amendment is definitely a possibility in the future. And I just want to say that dictators don't live forever. And everybody, if we just stay on the course and we keep focused on fighting together collectively as a group and moving more that way instead of a bunch of individuals, we all have to come together and work to beat this. And I definitely think it's achievable. And I'm just fortunate to be in such company as you and Sam and everybody on the network. And we're going to keep fighting. We're not going to stop. And if you feel tired, take a break. You can always come back to it. But the heart is good. And I think we can keep persisting forward. I think we can do it.
Thank you so much, Vanessa. Thanks, Vanessa Branda. Guys, check out her Polytoxic podcast right here on the Siren Network with our friend Sari Beth.
Yeah.
Thanks, Vanessa. We'll see you later.
Thanks for having me. Bye.
Bye. So now we're bringing in Adam Mockler. Adam Mockler, you guys are, I'm sure, extremely familiar with. He is host of the Adam Mockler Show on YouTube with over 1.8 million subscribers. Holy shit, first of all, congratulations on that. That is a massive milestone. You are helping a lot of people navigate this moment in time, which has not been easy for any of us. So what I'm doing with everybody who's coming on before we break it into these segments in time and we travel back in time is to just kind of get your reflections on where we are right now, and then we can start to look back.
First of all, thank you all for having me on. We are 1 year in. It's been a really stressful year, but it's good to have like-minded people all pushing together towards one pro-democracy goal. I think the past year has been stunning, but one of the worrying parts is how desensitized most Americans have become to what is happening at the very top levels of our institution. Like Trump can post about invading Greenland and then rob Reiner in the same day, and only one of those things will break through to the average American, if that. So throughout the past year, the lack of breaking through had worried me until we built this digital media ecosystem where now we are in full force spreading our pro-democracy message, spreading the truth. So throughout all of the grim months over the past year where things haven't been going our way, where Trump seems to have just unfettered executive power, there are glimmers of hope. I feel like there are certain checks that are holding. Donald Trump multiple times has gotten his appointees smacked down in the Eastern District of Virginia. Like Lindsey Halligan got pushed aside. A few other people got pushed aside. So there are some checks that are holding. Marjorie Taylor Greene even resigned 15 days ago. So it's not like everything is going well for them. MAGA Mike Johnson is essentially a lame duck. So throughout all of the grimness, I think there is a brighter side. I think we will return to power for sure. And then the next DOJ will act accordingly.
Your lips to God's ears. What do you think, before we jump back in time, what do you think specifically is helping things break through, other than how awful they are, right? And other than how much suffering there is going on right now? If you had to say, like, is it the videos? Is it certain voices? Is it a certain perspective or style of messaging? What kind of things do you think are piercing that bubble?
Lately, the ICE videos, just the visceral on the ground videos of American citizens getting shoved to the ground. I mean, of course, immigrants getting abused as well. But I think the absolute volume of the videos hitting our feed right now is indisputable, and everybody's seeing that and being like, what the hell? This is not the America that I want. This is way too much. I also think it's having a bunch of like-minded individuals pushing the same message. So this is really unfortunate that it had to be in this scenario. But right after Renee Nicole Good was shot, I opened up my Instagram and I saw the Creator Network at like firing on all cylinders in a way that I hadn't seen before. So I opened it up and I saw Jolly Good Ginger with like a breaking news post that had 100,000 likes, and Aaron Parnas broke it. Then I saw Midas Touch posted about it, and I was like, I just saw millions of people collectively rise up on my feed. Of course, it's a tragedy, but I saw millions of people, like, it's breaking through to people that I went to high school with that are liking and reposting. And I think the administration's lack of transparency surrounding Renee Nicole Good, and then lack of transparency surrounding the Epstein files, then of course Greenland, it all compounds to create a pretty bad vibe for this administration that is breaking through on social media. So really quickly, like among my generation, Trump's approval rating among Gen Zers has dropped 42 points since he took office, which is crazy. It's insane.
Yeah. Right. Well, and part of that, right, like you said, it's a very visual economy that we live in now. These videos, this is how people share information. My own girlfriend chat, they're not super political. Those videos were breaking through there too. But another big piece of that is how much things cost and our lived experiences, right? Like Joe Biden had a difficult time like making people feel that the economy was moving in the right direction, despite the fact that by just about every metric it was. And Donald Trump is attempting to do the same thing. And one thing that began, now we can travel back in time, I really do need a sound effect, back to February and March of 2025 was, and we're still contending to this to this day, because what we just have seen with his threats against European countries that won't support us invading Greenland, whatever, this is when the tariff stuff began. So in February of 2025, the first wave of tariffs began, 10% on China, 25% on Canada and Mexico. So let's start there. Like I said, we are still contending with this. It is one of these weapons he uses to exert pressure and or punishment and or reward. But he keeps saying we're making money on these tariffs. But let's talk about that.
Yep. So the stock market today is absolutely tanking after his most recent tariff announcement. Conservatives always like to point to the stock market being at all-time highs, but that's not even impressive. What is impressive is that Trump has, on like 10 separate occasions, tanked the stock market throughout this presidency, not only in February when he announced the initial tariffs, but then also the Liberation Day tariffs and then subsequent tariffs following. He tanked the stock market over and over, and now it's growing at a slower rate than it was under Biden during Biden's last 9 or 10 months. And then we look at unemployment. It's increased. We look at inflation. That's the big one. When Biden left office, inflation was at 2.9%, roughly 3%, somewhere around there. It had actually like steadied. We had stuck the landing. There was a steady hand with the inflation. And then when Liberation Day tariffs happen, or around February, March, April, we see inflation begin to spike back up. Now, the thing with the tariffs that's tricky is Trump kept doing these 90-day delays with certain countries. So it was kind of like illusory, where he would say that the tariffs on China have started, but he actually just delayed it. And then he makes another announcement and then delays it. But when all was said and done, when the tariffs were all enacted, we saw price increases. That's why Trump had to remove tariffs on beef a few months after they went into effect. He had to remove tariffs on multiple food items because they absolutely increased prices. There are now studies coming out showing that small businesses were just smacked by these tariffs. And think about it like this. Trump is always bragging about these trillions and trillions. He's lying, let's say, about these trillions that he's bringing in for large businesses. But who cares about the large businesses when you're leaving the small businesses behind? The small businesses that now have to pay these tariff fees and can't hire new employees, can't expand their staff or give bonuses. The small businesses are where we should focus.
It's almost as if putting a guy who bankrupted casinos in charge.
Almost, maybe. Maybe.
Yeah. It's almost as if hiring a business fraud who can't even operate a charity in New York because he stole from his own charity was not the greatest idea. It's almost as if we could have looked at the metrics from the first season of this shit show, where he once again inherited an economy moving in the right direction and then left office losing the most jobs since Herbert Hoover, and was already losing jobs before the pandemic that he bungled, which is like, we don't even talk about it anymore, but that's just insanity. But now that's ancient history. And we're still just a year back in time looking at still February 2025, when something else happened that we can look back on with reflection now, because they invited all those right-wing influencers to the West Wing of the White House and gave them all the Epstein file binders, and they all posed with their pictures, with their binders. And it's kind of crazy looking back on that now, considering we are 32 days over the deadline for them to release the files. How much have they released? 1% at this point and redacted them without explanation. So let's go back in time to that moment.
Yeah, it's funny because I remember those binders specifically say the Epstein files, phase 1. Well, guess what? We never got a phase 2. Never did we ever get a phase 2 of these files. I debated one of the guys who had that, Jack Posobiec, and I called that out, and he just made fun of like my facial hair. He had some like baby response. I was like, bro, you're covering up for pedophiles, literally. But if we went through the timeline is just so bizarre that it's hard to remember every single thing that happened. But it starts off with the Epstein files, the influencers that are standing around there. Then Pam Bondi has a Fox News hit in February where she's essentially saying the Epstein files are on my desk. I'm just taking a look. So she reopened this can of worms.
Yeah.
And I feel like it's a little bit quiet. People are kind of making demands. Elon Musk then comes out swinging and says Donald Trump is in the Epstein files. Then there's a massive wave of pressure where the DOJ tries to release some video footage of Epstein's cell, but then we learned it's not Epstein's cell, and it was actually edited with Premiere Pro or something. Like they were literally editing the files. And then beyond that, Kash Patel likely perjured himself in front of Congress and said, hey, there was no other sex trafficking going on. Then we learned that was false. Then they sent FBI agents over to Winchester to redact the files en masse. They sit Trump down and say your names are in these files. I mean, it's the largest cover-up. It is a larger cover-up than Watergate in size, scope, and scale. Watergate involved Nixon's immediate cabinet and some people around him and some campaign people. I mean, this is multi-institution. This is the DOJ. This is the FBI. Every single institution under the sun is currently covering up pedophilia for the Epstein class. It is pretty absurd. And sometimes I wonder, I really think it's an effective way to show how not transparent the administration is. For example, the administration also is hiding economic data. They're clearly hiding stuff about Trump's health. They are hiding videos of the Venezuela strike. I think that breaks through to people when you say, look at how untransparent this administration is, and look at how this bleeds through to everything else. And of course, it's been nice that the victims have at least gotten some percent of closure, but I guess 1% of closure. It seems like we're making progress, but the survivors are still fighting, pushing.
Yeah, and most transparent administration ever. They ran on this. They promised this to their own voters, to their own supporters, to Charlie Kirk, to Candace Owens, to Laura Loomer. They promised these things, and then they put themselves in this pickle, which is so confounding to me, but they did. And this is one of those things that also pierces the partisan bubble, because of all the things that they would never come together on. There was always this great chasm in between everything. They were in their foxholes, but we saw movement for really the first time across party lines on these Epstein files, where he had Lauren Boebert in the Situation Room to pressure her not to vote to release them. And we had just enough Republicans led by, look, I'm not a fan of Thomas Massie or Marjorie Taylor Greene, but on this, they got this one thing right.
Yeah, that's, I went through so much of the timeline as much as I can recollect, and I still forgot that a bunch of Republicans then revolted. Then MAGA Mike Johnson got hit with yet another discharge petition, which it's interesting because, just to clarify, a discharge petition allows people to subvert the Speaker of the House. Now, 7 of those have happened under MAGA Mike Johnson. That's the same amount that's happened over the past 2 decades, I believe. Wow. So he is getting slapped left and right by not just Democrats, but then the Republicans, like Thomas Massie, like Lauren Boebert, like ex-Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene, who resigned because Trump sent his mob after her, and she was then the subject of the same type of she was on the subject of the same type of heat she gave off for a year. So I don't know. It's all a mess. They need to stop covering up pedophilia, but I think that it really illustrates how corrupt this administration is, huh? It really, Donald Trump gets uniquely squirmy around this one subject. You don't even have to ask that much of a question, and he gets backed into a corner on his own. He's he's yelling at reporters, calling women reporters piggy or terrible people or a bunch of names. You don't even have to apply that much pressure, and he gets very defensive.
Not to mention, pedophile protector, it gets him to say fuck you twice and give you the little fun-sized finger if you just call him out on what he is.
That should be a bigger story. That should be, that needs to go down in some sort of history book. How come none of this stuff bleeds through? The fact that the president flipped someone off. Think about it like this. If Newsom or Biden, either one of them, had flipped somebody off over the past year, or Biden when he was the president, it would be a massive scandal. It would be huge. And Trump just gets to walk away because, you know why? He had an increasingly unhinged meltdown on stage, right after. He just never stops with the attention grabby. So it's hard to stay focused on one issue.
Yeah, and the double standards are really astounding. I mean, Joe Biden called Ducey Light a stupid son of a bitch, and Fox was basically ready to put his head on a spit. But
Biden was right. Biden was totally right there.
He really was. And with the last minute or so we have, I mean, there was other things with DOGE and then more tariffs, but I'm asking everybody again, in kind of closing, looking forward. We spent the last 15 minutes mostly looking back, but what, if you had any thoughts for looking forward for the next however much manageable time, we can say 3 years or the immediate future, what your thoughts are on that.
The Democrats lost the election because I don't think we ran enough of a change agent in 2024. I mean, Kamala ran a great campaign, but at the end of the day, voters that I've talked to, that I've gone on the road and chatted with, people were looking for a change agent. That doesn't mean the Democrats are out forever. There are so many like-minded people in this country that dislike ICE, that like freedom of speech, that like democracy, that do not like Trump, that we can mobilize and turn out by just speaking the truth. There are so many like-minded people that are looking for change right now, a change agent. And just because we didn't stick the landing in 2024 does not mean in 10 months from now, 9 or 10 months from now, we can't just absolutely rip them a new one. And they're scared. They're clearly scared. They're trying every trick in the book, from redistricting to undermining voting, to try to not get us to turn out. But like-minded individuals turning out in America can win, always.
Thank you so much, Adam. It was great to talk to you guys. Go check him out on the Adam Mockler Show on YouTube. Thank you to Adam Mockler.
Always great.
So, Adam's great. I love getting the perspective from Gen Z. It really, as a mom of the far edge of Gen Z, I have a 16-year-old, it helps me a lot feel like hopeful for my kids' future. But with that, we're going to bring in my good friend Brooklyn Dad Defiant. It is wonderful to see my friend and co-host of the Joe and BDD show right here on the Siren Network. But he is also the host of the Defiant Weekly. That is your new show on YouTube. I get to talk to you at least once a week, so it is always good to see your face, even as we mark this grim. No anniversary connotes something positive. You know what I mean? It's usually a happy affair. This is not that, but I still love you and would love to have your perspective on everything. We're going to travel back in time in a minute. You have April 2025 and May 2025. But first, let's just check in on where you're at right now, how you're doing, your top line thoughts on this moment. You are muted, my friend.
Yeah, sorry. I muted myself because I realized like I coughed while Adam was speaking. So I was like, uh-oh.
Yep.
Yeah, so I'm really glad to be here. You guys did a fantastic job putting together this lineup. Well, first of all, you had Little Miss VRB, who is incredible. Adam Mockler, my man. I gotta tell you how fantastic you are. You are killing it.
Yeah,
And
great.
I'm so proud to see people of the younger generation, the Gen Zers and whatever other gens there are out there, handling their business and stepping up to the plate and claiming and claiming responsibility for what's happening here. So it's fantastic, and you are an excellent interviewer, of course. So looking forward to, among other things, so looking forward to 2024, or well, how I am right now. I am doing just as well as can be expected as anyone else is. I'm just trying to deal with the fire hose of insanity, the flooding the zone strategy that they have that has kind of desensitized everybody. But I'm still my nerves are on fire on a daily basis from all of the crazy that's going on. And I'm just going to use that as fuel, as anger fuel, to propel me towards November and to stay focused.
Yeah. That fire hose of fuckery is by design. I mean, Steve Bannon said it. This is intentional, right? They want us overwhelmed. They want us to grasping at all the things, because then we can't focus any of our energy on one thing, and that helps them to destabilize. And also, it is important to give yourself the grace and space to be overwhelmed, to need to unplug, to need to put it down, walk away, exercise, self-care, all those things. It's okay. It's not only okay, it's actually kind of imperative that you do it.
Yeah, I actually I have a hard and fast rule. When Friday night begins, that's pretty much it. Like, I will pop in periodically, but often I miss a lot of I miss this past year and a half, maybe past 2 years. I think I've missed a lot of major events, like the July of 2024. I missed when that thing happened with Trump in Butler, Pennsylvania. Uh, the magical ear thing. I missed President Biden resigning, but
Oh.
that's because it's a choice, it's a choice to unplug and spend time with family and relax and recharge. And it's so necessary because there's especially now, there's a lot of negativity that we expose ourselves to, throughout the day, like
Yeah.
9 a.m. until 7 p.m. It's crazy. So yeah, you got to get away from that and like kind of purge your soul and touch grass, as they say. So
Yeah.
I've been doing a lot of that, but I fight as hard as I can when I need to.
Yeah, and empathetic human beings, which so many people, everybody on this live, but so many people who occupy our spaces, but so many people out there, particularly on the left, are empathetic human beings. And watching the suffering that we're seeing, watching the depravity, the inhumanity of what we're seeing, all of that every single day, it takes a toll. I mean, Adam was saying that those are the things, that those are the videos, sadly, that are breaking through. Yeah.
I don't understand how this is acceptable to people. Like, um, to watch a kid. I saw a video of ICE detaining a kid, and this kid was probably no older than 13 or 14 years old on his way home from school. And he was like, "Can I go inside and get my ID for you?" And they said no, and it filled me with rage because,
Mhm.
like, I've got 3 boys, and God forbid somebody prevents my kid from
Mhm.
coming home, from school, and he's a kid. Forget his
Mhm.
parents. What are they doing? And how are Americans okay with this? This is what I voted for. Really? That's what you voted for? You voted for a soccer mom to be shot in the face 3 times. You voted for an old man who is a US citizen to be taken out of a shower. I don't know if you saw that. It was
I did.
horrendous.
I
Taken
did.
out of a shower, taken half naked outside into sub-zero temperatures. Come on now.
Mhm.
Come
Yeah.
on. How
And
how how fragile, how broken are you that is okay with you? That you're okay with that, with people being dehumanized and mistreated and
mhm.
abused and terrorized. Who the fuck are you?
It again, remember, we talk about this all the time. History may not repeat itself, but it certainly does rhyme. And the dehumanization is very much intentional, right? Like at this moment in time, there are 3 times as many people in ICE detention facilities as there were in Germany at this moment in time, right before World War II began. We
Wow.
have 3 times as many people in ICE detention centers right now than they had before they really ramped up at the start of World War II in Germany. Like
Hmm.
again, what they are prepping us all for with this dehumanization, with making this man, with parading him in his underwear, with picking up a kid working outside of a Target and beating him up and dropping him off at a
Oh yeah.
Walmart,
Yeah.
like they want us to become numb to it, right? So and in the beginning they weren't doing these things yet. They didn't have as many former January 6th insurrectionist rioters in masks as they do now, and he was being far less aggressive. So going back in time to April 2025, sure there was a lot of inhumane treatment, and we were seeing people disappeared and shipped off to CCOT, etc. But they
Yeah.
were still focusing largely on like the tariff stuff. So at that time, we're going back because it helps to take these things in bites, right? Because it's
Yeah.
an all one lump. We can forget so much. So it's helpful to go back and revisit it because all of this leads to where we get to where we are today. And we have to go back and look partly because we need to name it, but also because we can't repeat this shit. We have to have our eyes wide open to all of it, so that we don't history doesn't rhyme in the
Yeah.
future for our kids and for theirs. So going back to April 2025, because you have April and May 2025 2025, Liberation Day, Trump announces a 10% baseline tariff on all imports into the United States. Over the next week, the U.S. market crashed. S&P 500 fell 4.88%, and the NASDAQ dropped nearly 6%. Remember that? Remember all those graphs and all those memes and all the viral shit, right? Like I did that. Trump did that. One of the single worst day losses in our history. So they're going back to, again, the guy who bankrupted casinos saying only I can fix the economy, right?
It's not like we didn't warn them. We warned them over and over and over. And what I was most concerned about, what I was worried about, was actually that he was going to do, like, that he would be smart for a change and do nothing. Because what
Right.
he could have done if he were smart would just be like just to coast on what Joe Biden already set in motion. Like
Mhm.
the numbers were already coming down. Inflation was coming down. He keeps going back to 2022 and saying inflation was the highest in history. First of all, it was 9% in 2022, right?
Mhm.
And that was not the highest in history, but he steadily brought that shit down to 3%. But this genius with a J wanted to tinker with the economy and put his own little tariff stamp on it because tariffs fix everything. Tariffs make us all rich. And it's blown up in his face, and it's a disaster. No matter how many times he tells us tariffs are making us rich and we're bringing in so much money from tariffs, and we're going to give you some of that tariff money back, which is our own money, actually, you dumbass.
Right.
And why isn't there anybody around him who can correct him on these fallacies? Like, is that by design? Is
Mhm.
he saying idiotic things intentionally just because he assumes that his MAGA audience is that dumb and that the average American Joe won't know the difference between, um, us paying for tariffs or China paying for tariffs? Is that what the idea is?
I think with Donald Trump, in many cases, it's the power of positive thinking, right? I think he thinks that he can tell people, like he had much success with this, telling people things are worse than they were with Joe Biden. And I think he thinks that works in the converse. I think he thinks, for instance, that if you get Ghislaine Maxwell, a convicted child sex predator, to say that you were a lovely gentleman and you did nothing wrong, that you're exonerated. He thinks if you get somebody like Mueller to say, well, technically because of the memo, we can't actually go after a sitting president, that exonerates him, right? So he thinks that if he tells people, oh no, we're the hottest country in the world and things are better for you than they've ever been, and they're going to the grocery store like, I can't afford any of this. I certainly can't afford hamburger. I can't. They're talking about steak. I can't afford a steak. I can afford a piece of chicken, a piece of broccoli, a single tortilla, and one other thing.
The $3 meal, yeah.
Right? The $3 meal. And the thing, you cannot make people feel something they don't when they are struggling. You just can't. Even the
Bingo.
most like loyal Trumper, the most like OG MAGA, if they know, right? And he's now saying that this is Joe Biden's economy. He also said that he used the tariff money to bail out the farmers who needed to be bailed out.
Because of the tariffs.
Like what?
Yeah.
What?
You can't make this stuff up.
No,
But
but let's wrap up April and May 2025 with something good, because
Yeah.
what happened in April of 2025 was the hands-off protests, which were a series of demonstrations launched across the United States, the largest at that time. One day nationwide display of public resistance against the Donald Trump regime. And
Mhm.
I think we forget some of the highlights and the good things. And that was the first moment that people got to stand up collectively and say no more.
Oh yeah, yeah. I love what our side did and continues to do, but especially with the hands off marches, especially with the march that happened to coincide with his little birthday military parade or whatever.
Small
That was
advance parade.
hilarious. I'll never forget the squeaky tank and the off rhythm marching. It was fantastic. But um Yeah, I think resistance is gonna show up in many forms. But when I spoke earlier about staying focused, I think the most important way for us to resist is just be straight up about what we're experiencing, what we're going through. And that's because affordability and healthcare are going to be the two main blunt objects with which we will bludgeon what's the word I'm looking for? Not literally, but
Figuratively,
figuratively bludgeon
metaphorically. Yeah.
metaphorically bludgeon the Republican Party because they have screwed things up royally. And as you said earlier, you can't tell somebody how they're experiencing the economy. They're going to tell you because we go shopping, we go food shopping, we pay our electric bills and water bills, and we know that everything is going up despite Donald Trump during this idiotic rambling press briefing today, repeating at least 4 times that prices were going down. They're not
No,
going down. And I
no.
wish, I wish our reporters or the reporters would for once say which prices are going down, what wars, which 8 wars have you stopped, so since they're not doing it, we're going to have to do it, and the only way we can do it is to stay focused. Don't go for every squirrel, every shiny object that we happen to scroll past in our feed. Stay focused. The message is affordability and healthcare. And today there was the Stop the Save Act hashtag that popped up. I want to tell people that Save Act thing is going to disenfranchise a lot of voters by insisting that they need a passport in order to vote. They're trying to do away with mail-in voting. So stay focused on the things that matter. And if we can't vote, we have nothing. We have
Right.
no voice without voting. So
Amen.
yeah.
Amen. And thank you for bringing that up. That is incredibly important. As a woman who changed her last name, I really appreciate you flagging that. We're not gonna drop the ball on making sure to amplify that. Thank you, Brooklyn Dad Defiant. Guys, go check out all his new shows, including one with me on the Siren, and he's got his show on YouTube as well. Thanks, Brooklyn. It's great to see you. I'll see you in 2 days.
Okie dokie.
Bye. Um, Always great to see Brooklyn. I'm so excited to introduce my friend and new dad. I forget he's gonna have to tell me if he has 2 or 3 kids. David Pacman, best-selling author and host of one of the most watched independent progressive programs in the country, The David Pacman Show, on YouTube with over 3.4 million subscribers. Hi, David. How many babies do you have?
Oh, it's got to be like a dozen by now or something. No, I mean, I have 2 kids. I have 2 kids.
2 kids, and congratulations, because you're a fairly new dad. I mean, yes, you have a little one right at home
Yeah,
now.
new enough to not be sleeping that much.
Oh, yeah. I forget about that sweet spot when they're like newborns, and it's like, oh, they're so quiet and they just yeah. So, as a dad, right? Like, I want to check in with you too, especially as a new dad. How are you doing before we travel back in time? Because you are June and July, and a lot of shit was happening in June and July of 2025. I want to check in with you now in this moment before we look back and then look ahead.
How am I doing personally or in terms of how my assessment of what's taking place?
Well, all of it, right? So, I mean, honestly, I would love to know how you're doing personally, and then, how your assessment of what's taking place impacts that.
Listen, I think one of the things I have conversations about with people over and over again is if you live in blue states, you are insulated from some of the insanity of what this administration is doing, but not nearly all of it. So the upside is there are states that have programs that have always exceeded Obamacare requirements. So when Trump does this, that, or the other thing in certain states on that issue, you can be protected to a degree. In other areas, the disastrous effects of Donald Trump's tariffs make things more expensive no matter what state you're in. The embarrassment of Trump foreign policy, that's a humiliation no matter what state you live in. So, I mean, I think it's sort of a mixed bag, and it kind of is a reminder that a lot of the strongest supporters of the current president are the people that are actually being hurt the most by the policies. If you are a middle-class person in New York versus a lower middle class person in Mississippi, you are going to be more hurt by what Trump is doing in the latter scenario, and you're way more likely to have voted for him. So this is just an ongoing problem in terms of like how do we get some of those people to understand that they are voting against their own best interests.
Well, so let me ask you then, how do we get them to understand? Do they have to really put their hand in the fire over and over again to get them to understand?
You know,
Like you do
here's
with
the
your
way
kids?
I think about retail versus wholesale as an analogy. Okay.
Mhm.
The retail strategy of sitting down with one person who is voting for Trump over and over again. I had this soybean farmer on my show the other day, Caleb Ragland, who's
Oh,
been on congressional testimony and talking about how the tariffs are a disaster. He
wow.
told me straight up, I voted for Trump 3 times and I generally support what he's doing. I just don't support what he's doing with the tariffs. To convince a lot of these people to change their minds, maybe you do it for fun at the Thanksgiving table, but it's not an electoral strategy. It's just
Right.
at scale, it's not going to work. I think the electoral strategy is half the country doesn't vote, and a lot of them don't understand how voting relates to what they see in their community. So I think the strategy is not to mess with trying to convince a lot of these people. It's here's a whole bunch of people who don't vote. You say, what are you concerned about? And when they tell you, you explain, oh, we have a way to deal with that. And it's voting for the people that represent you. I think that's a much better wholesale strategy. Arguing with your crazy uncle at Thanksgiving, fine. Maybe you get him to change his mind. But I just don't think that's how we're going to win elections.
Yeah, and a lot has changed electorally in the last year when it comes to perception, when it comes to support, when it comes to poll numbers, et cetera, when it comes to public trust, when it comes to the economy, when it comes to all of these things. But we are going to travel back in time to sort of revisit, again, the building blocks for how we got here.
Yeah.
And we're in June of 2025 now. And it's easy to forget when we look at Minneapolis that in June of 2025, Donald Trump deployed the National Guard to Los Angeles, and there were nationwide protests. Los Angeles felt like it was under siege. So it feels almost quaint to look back at that moment when we were all extremely upset, understandably and righteously, because Donald Trump put the National Guard on Los Angeles city streets. But so let's reflect on that moment versus, again, kind of where we are now in the juxtaposition of the two.
Yeah, it quaint is a good word for it. And, you know, the naivete that we had when the chaos was brought by federal agents to only a 2-by-3 block radius in Los Angeles to a degree compared to what has happened now. I mean, listen, I think that this confirms that authoritarians love to test. And when authoritarians don't meet resistance, it opens the door to them to go further. And we have been saying for a long time that the defenders of Trump, and even some on the left who have minimized the dangers of Trump, who go, oh, it's bluster. He likes to say a lot of things, but not do them. You've got to judge him by his actions, not by his words. Well, we started judging him by his actions with the Los Angeles situation. It was like, listen, this is a limited scope thing, and maybe the protests were getting a little bit out of control. And then now we're in January of 2026, and we're looking at potentially troops being pulled from Alaska to deploy to Minneapolis. And the theoretical possibility, maybe more than theoretical, of Minnesota National Guard up against Trump's federal ICE goons. And so, listen, we've been paying attention to what he does, and it's a disaster.
Yeah, and they very much made it, or making it extremely clear that they don't want us to push back on their testing, right? They don't want us to hold those lines, because every time we do that, they justify something like Renee Good's killing, or like, you know, arresting American citizens for using their First Amendment right.
Can I say one more thing about that?
Of course, yes.
We're kind of seeing a de facto elimination of the First Amendment. And I'll tell you what I mean by that. You go and you look at the Bill of Rights, you still have the First Amendment. It's there on paper, right? But when you think to yourself, I want to go and use my voice in a constitutionally protected way at a protest, but depending on which ICE agents I encounter, depending on whether they are the slightly more trained or the slightly less trained ones, depending on the mood that day, I risk being up to killed, but certainly dragged around, detained, arrested, etc.
Yeah.
The First Amendment is still there, right? In some nominal way, that hasn't changed. But what is happening where people are being punished merely for giving their opinion or filming, which is another constitutionally protected activity.
Right.
It is a self-censorship that is a de facto limitation on the First Amendment that we are seeing right now.
Again, by design, right? Because they want us to be afraid. I'll share a side story before we move on, because there's so much that happened in this little short span of time last year. I told this story. I don't know if others have heard it before, but this is very recent. So my kids are almost 13 and 16, and they know what's going on. And Renee Good's murder pierced that bubble, right? So they're seeing this in their feeds. And ICE is here in Jersey now more than they have been before. And in a few towns over, Morristown, they had a big raid, and they took a 16-year-old out of a laundromat, etc. And I was talking about it with my kids because we have dialogues about these things, and both of them immediately started to get upset and said, "Don't you dare, Mom, don't you dare go film this. Don't you dare go there. Don't go there." And they were like, you could hear the anxiety. So
Yep.
what my kids have learned now is, to your point, that's not safe. So what kind of an effect does that have on young people or anybody else paying attention? My kids were worried I would be killed
Yep.
for simply showing up to record what they're doing.
Yeah, and these are not trivial concerns. I mean, my older daughter is way too young to understand what's going on. But the way I think about it is, I've got to pick her up at daycare at 4:30. What happens if I go to express my voice, and then all of a sudden, the end result is she ends up waiting because I can't get there because for using my voice, I've been whatever it is that might happen. I mean, this has a real chilling effect.
It does, and we can unpack that all day, but we're moving on because also in June of 2025, again, looks kind of quaint now by comparison, Trump strikes Iran, bringing the U.S. to the brink of a major conflict. No congressional approval, of course, but when you look at what we just did in Venezuela and what we're now threatening in Greenland, again, going back, it's like, oh, this is the gentler times when we were just blowing up Iran for no reason.
It is. And, we have, I hope we've done away with this notion of Trump as the only true anti-war candidate. I think back to the old Democratic primary where we were told Tulsi is the only real anti-war Democrat.
Oh, God.
And then Tulsi ended up saying, well, Trump's my guy, and Trump is the only anti-war president. And then look at this, and Trump wants, one Nobel Peace Prize for each conflict he claims to have ended. But this is a guy who is not only violating norms, we are talking about a willingness to generate conflict and the potential for conflict. And the sad thing is, there are defenders of Trump who say that this is all strategic. This is use unpredictability to keep them on their toes, and it's good. But the thing is, when you ask them, well, how exactly is it good for the United States? Because China figured out they can go elsewhere for soybeans.
Mhm.
France is figuring out they can make other alliances.
Canada.
In what way is that unpredictability good for the United States? And I would argue that it's simply not.
It's not. Much like, and we can just glaze by this one, July 2025, the Rose Garden was completely paved over with the Rose Garden Club, which has dining tables and yellow umbrellas, not unlike a certain gilded golf course in Florida. But the bigger thing that happened in July of 2025, the one big, beautiful bill was signed on July 4th. The Congressional Budget Office estimates that approximately 7.5 million to 10.2 million people will lose Medicaid coverage by 2034 due to the provisions in that bill. I mean, that bill, there's so much in that bill to unpack, not to mention that with the Medicaid, but let's revisit that because it's so incredibly damaging to the American people and our economy.
Listen, without getting into the minutia of the bill, the way I kind of think about it top level is that Trump, as a rich kid from Queens and Manhattan, spent most of his life, number one, not really understanding what it means that you might have a $200 expense that you've got to borrow money to pay. He just doesn't know what that means. That's number one.
Right.
And then number two, most of his life he spent deliberately staying isolated from the very people that now make up the bulk of his base. And it's very difficult to believe that a guy who spent most of his life saying, I don't want to go anywhere near the very people I am now trying to appeal to, is going to suddenly develop empathy for those very people. And so if you look at the first 68 years of Donald Trump's life before he entered politics, they are predictive of the way that Donald Trump legislates. And they're talking about, we had taco night tonight, and we actually had the big tortillas, you might be pleased to know, not the tiny one that you get with the piece of chicken and floret and then the taco. We had the full-size tortillas. And everything about, that's out of touch. A tax plan where the benefits disproportionately go to the rich. It's what you would expect from a 68-year-old at the time Trump entered politics, whose life was like his first 68 years.
Right. And again, back to a point you made earlier about, getting people to understand that they voted for and things that are antithetical to their needs. This bill, everything in it, essentially hurts them. And unfortunately, they have to feel it. I mean, Democrats are fighting. Well, we can have that conversation another day. But before you go, just like last thoughts before we bring Joe Galina in, again, looking forward.
Well, I think it's always important when desperation sets in to have some milestone to look forward to. And I think right now, as we're almost in February, it is that 8 months from now, 9 months from now, we have the midterm elections. And these midterms, especially if Democrats can take the House, will serve to effectively end the presidency of Donald Trump. Now, of course, he will still be in office. He'll still be golfing. He'll still be consuming massive amounts of fast food and all of these different things. But he will not be able to get any significant legislation through. This is going to also have the effect of putting Republicans in the position between 26 and 28 of deciding, is sticking with Trump good for me as his political career is going to end, or is it time to abandon Donald Trump? And that, I think, is going to be something to be exploited by Democrats if they are able to. They're not always able to exploit things that are exploitable. But the next step is we are just 8-9 months from these midterms, and taking the House is sort of like step 0.1 here in trying to right the ship.
Right. Absolutely. Thank you so much, David Pacman. It's always great to talk to you, and love to your family. We'll see you soon.
Thank you. Good to see you. Take care.
Good to see you too. Bye. Hi, Joe.
Hi, Joe. How are you?
Good. How are you? So said bye to David, and we are welcoming my friend Joe Galina, who is co-founder of Call to Activism with his gorgeous wife Cosima. You have over 5 million followers across platforms, and you have Off the Record right here on the Siren Network. You are one of my longest standing friends in this space, someone I love and trust. So welcome. What everybody's doing is what I'm asking is, in the beginning, before we get into traveling back in time, is I want to check in with you right now, how you're doing. You have a toddler. Oh my God, how old is she now?
She's going to be 4 years old.
4.
Unbelievable. So it's crazy how fast it went.
So fast. So like how you're doing, and both, just a quick top line assessment of where we are and how you're doing personally in this moment.
How I'm doing. I mean, look at me, Joe. How do I look like I'm doing? I'm only 15 years old.
Wait a minute. Don't say that, because then Donald Trump might want to date you.
Oh my God. That's a good one.
And by date, I mean, yeah.
Yeah, please. Yeah.
No. I'm sorry. I was sorry. Go ahead.
No,
it's
you
always look like $1 million.
It's basically a shit show. We wake up every single morning, like everyone listening, and we're just waiting for the fresh hell that we're entering for that day. It seems like you think it can't get any worse, and then the next hour comes by. So it's been a lot. I feel the weight of responsibility of being able to bring news and also commentary to people that is presented in a way that provides the truth, unlike what I think modern media is doing, where they have these bullshit both sides rules, and they're not meeting the moment, right? And I'm talking to you, CBS, and I'm talking to you, some cable networks, where they'll air Trump's 3-hour press conference in full with no commentary, no fact checking, no stopping. And then at the very end, they'll have the fact checker come on when everyone changes the channel to go over all the lies. And I just don't think that that's meeting the moment. And it's not the news's job to say, Donald Trump says that the sky is green today. It's our job to say, no, I looked out the window. It's blue, and he's a liar, and here's why. And so that's why I love new media. I love you for what you do. And I think it's just so important, because that's what we do. We help provide the context. So at least we try, so that we can beat this bullshit.
Yeah, I was listening to NPR recently, and Steve Inskeep, is that his last name? He said, I can't call him a liar because I can't. He was on with what is his name from CNN? Ellie Honig, and he's like, I can't call him a liar because I can't speak to his state of mind. And I'm like, what? Stop that right now! Stop that right now! You can call a lie a lie. You can call disinformation disinformation. You can actually do that. But that sort of makes me want to pivot to this question before we travel back in time to what do you think has changed? Because you've been at this a long time, right? Like you're one of the OGs here. What do you think has changed in terms of the usage and engagement with people who are in new media versus legacy media? Because from where I'm sitting, a shit ton has changed, and we have sort of forced that change, but the American people have also demanded it because both sides in CBS, which is CBS, they are not meeting the moment at all. So what do you think has changed in terms of the other direction, in terms of them coming to us, utilizing us?
Absolutely. Well, I'm thrilled with that. To Leader Hakeem Jeffries' credit, he really has pushed the Democratic caucus in the House to speak to new media more than ever before. There's also a huge push in the Senate. Senator Cory Booker, especially, is someone who has facilitated interviews behind the scenes, and a lot of people don't know that, but he believes very strongly in new media. So for that, I am very grateful. You could see cult activism, you could see your show, and you could see that we have lawmakers willing to sit down with new media in this unprecedented way. But still, I hope that people watching understand that the left, the Democratic base, even just new media, we are just this big, while the right wing is just vastly superior because they started earlier, they recognized it, they infused themselves in podcasts and comedy shows, and you have YouTube is saturated. And so we're really playing catch up. And so it was a question of survival. If the left did not even attempt to try, we would be over in a generation because we're just not reaching so many people. And that's why everyone listening, you are so crucial because you build these platforms, you are these platforms. And by sharing and interacting, you're helping us put up even a semblance of a fight. So I love all the changes. I think that's great. We have so much more to do and we could continue to push this. And I love the lawmakers willing to sit down. I think we all need to explore new formats to make sure that we're getting information to the right people and as fast as we can.
Yeah.
But it really is a scary time. The last thing it says, like, even, Trump's first term was horrible, right? And we know probably hundreds of thousands of people died because of COVID and how he mishandled it, and maybe more. But the Republican Party, they sucked, but they were still not in on the game yet. And now every single Republican from the Senate down to the county dog catcher, they're all playing the game where Donald Trump says a lie and they all pretend it's true. And they know it's bullshit and they do it anyway.
Yeah.
And that's what we're fighting. And it's from every, they'll come out, oh, well, Donald Trump says the sky's green today. And we have to deal with that.
Or they'll say they didn't see it. Or they'll say, oh, he says a lot of things. And the media, just before we go back in time, but the media, I sometimes I'm like, where is the follow-up question here? Like Jake Tapper, who's one of my favorite targets, had Kristi Noem on, and he was good to press her on how they pardoned all of the January 6th rioters when they're saying that Renee Good was a domestic terrorist who deserved to be executed. And it was a good line of questioning, but she gave him a totally bullshit, gaslighting, meandering propagandist answer. And that was the end of the interview. And so, like, they're not going far enough. They're not asking. If it's me, ask every single day, where are the Epstein files? Ask them all. I don't care if you're asking Brooke Rollins. I don't care if you're asking Scott Bessent. Ask them all. Where are the Epstein files? And it is confounding and completely frustrating to me that they're not doing it. But again, the American people are not stupid, and they're going to be looking elsewhere, and they're looking for people who are going to shine those lights and put on that pressure, but people who are going to be telling the truth at the same time. And there are some people in this space on both sides who do not vet their information, and they should not have a platform. And that's another conversation for another day. But we are going to go back in time because, again, like I was saying with David, it almost seems sweet you live outside of the DC area. A year ago, well, sorry, in August of 2025, that was when Trump declared the state of emergency in Washington, D.C., leading to armed National Guard units patrolling and occupying D.C. And I'm sure you saw this today.
Absolutely.
He said, I like the look of military on our streets. Like, hello? Alarm bells? Anyone? So let's go back to that time period when my friends are going through, the train station and they're like, what is going on here? Let's go back to that time.
Absolutely. I mean, we got to see it firsthand, walking around Union Station, seeing the military troops. It's hard to explain how strange it is to see American troops patrolling American streets unless you see it with your own eyes. Like you might see clips in the news, but when you're walking around Union Station and you're seeing the uniforms and the walking, and it brings you to another place. It feels like we're in Beijing, it feels like we're in North Korea. And it's just like it takes away what America was supposed to be, right? The freest country in the world, but just that feeling when you're walking down the street and you feel free. To me, it gets a little robbed when you're walking and you feel this presence. It's just a very strange feeling. And we had local reporting that at some point, because they can't actually enforce the law, so we're spending a lot of money to put them in the cities. They really don't have law enforcement power. They were basically just picking up trash. They were picking up trash in the street. Our military troops. And to top it off, sorry, if you're gonna say something. Joe.
He mentioned that today too. Nobody told them to do that. They just did it themselves. They were cleaning graffiti themselves. They didn't have anything else to do.
Unbelievable.
Sorry, go ahead. Go on.
We spoke to a former major general the other day on cult activism who was a gem of a person speaking out, even though it's not that easy in that culture to speak out. And he was trying to explain that, it looks bad and we could all talk about that and democracy. He goes, but this is about military readiness. Donald Trump is spreading our military so thin. A third of our naval assets are still in the Caribbean, according to reports. You have troops that are being deployed all over. They want to send 1,500 to Minneapolis. You still have National Guard troops all over the country. All that means that these military members, they're not ready to face an emergency. God forbid one happens. And you could say that won't happen, but that's what we said about a pandemic. And that's why military readiness exists. And this guy has no forethought. He can't think. And so we're just dealing with the consequences, but it's a little scary.
Very scary. He's once again making us less safe, but he's also using them as props, as toys. Like I often think about how this 5-time draft dodger who called the fallen of war suckers and losers and insulted and demeaned a POW and attacked a Gold Star family and berated a military widow and desecrated Arlington National Cemetery, how he gets to be in charge of the men and women who put country first. And what he is doing is so predictable because he has no respect or regard for them. He's using them like toys in a sandbox, flying them over to show off in front of people, having them on their hands and knees to roll out a red carpet for Vladimir Putin on our soil, etc., using them to clean graffiti off walls. I mean, it's not at all, it's just not at all surprising, but as someone who, and I know you share this too, we hold them in such high regard, and they deserve dignity and they deserve to be utilized for what they signed up for. And it's not that, but it's also not surprising. But before we move on to your thoughts moving forward, going back to September now in 2025, it's impossible to forget all of this, but it's also, there's so much. You're an attorney. In September of 2025, Trump indicted James Comey. DOJ officials were forced to resign after declining to pursue criminal charges against Comey and Tish James. We now have resolution to those cases, at least temporarily, and we have people removed from these false appointments in these capacities. But like that again, going back in time, those were the first sort of major attacks, weaponizing the criminal justice system against his opponents and his detractors. So let's go back to that moment in time.
Absolutely. I've spoken to former members of the DOJ. We've lost hundreds of lawyers in the DOJ who've decided to leave because of the pressure. And I don't blame them. You know, part of me says, oh, I wish you would stay. But they were literally handicapped. Their
Yeah.
department was shut down. They're sort of like just in limbo. They stay home or they show up to the office. It makes no matter. Donald Trump shut down literally big, giant swaths of our DOJ, including in the civil rights division,
Yeah.
the lawyers that are supposed to enforce all the housing and the Equal Rights Amendment. They're all just on this weird Twilight Zone waiting period. So I don't blame them for leaving. But the DOJ attorney that I spoke to said, I just want you to be aware that I've been in the DOJ for about 15 years and I handled hundreds of cases. The DOJ doesn't bring a case and then have a judge throw it out for lack of evidence and then bring it back and then have it thrown out and bring it back. He says, in the 15 years I was in the DOJ, that has never happened once. He goes, typically we bring cases that we can pass a grand jury. And secondly, I have never heard of a case failing a grand jury and being brought again. And we have Letitia James's case, not once, not twice, not 3 times, but now they're talking about a 4th time.
Oh my
It
God.
is so corrupt, so BS, so disgusting. And it's just the state of affairs. And this is Donald Trump's revenge tour. And we're
Exactly.
seeing it happen in real time.
It really is. It's all about retribution, and there are no adults left in the room, so they'll do whatever his bidding is. In the last minute, can you ask? I'm asking everybody to look forward. You know, what do you see on the horizon, if anything is giving you hope or inspiration in this moment?
What's giving me hope is every poll that I've ever seen, even though I don't believe the polls, is still showing that Americans are starting to realize that Donald Trump is one of the biggest mistakes that America's ever made. 53% thought that Renee Good was killed unjustly. 61% thinks that ICE is going way too far and isn't appropriate. It seems like the American sentiment is going in our favor. I'm hopeful that we'll win the midterms. Having Speaker Hakeem Jeffries will be way better than having Speaker Mike Johnson. But it's still a very precarious time. We can't let our guard down. We have to be careful and just allow democracy to shine and not allow him to keep tearing it up, especially behind the scenes. So that's what we have to do, is just shine a light on basically everything.
It's so important, and it's very much something they don't want us to do. But it's great to see you, and thank you for always
Thanks,
killing it
Joe.
out there and for shining that light, Joe. Great to
You
see
too,
you.
Joe. You're the best. Thank you so much for
You're the
everything. and You're killing it
Thank you.
always.
Talk soon.
Thanks.
Bye. So we're gonna pivot.